Kicking things off in episode 5, it's time for the 1UZ and various engine bay items to be removed so that we can get started on some rust repairs and giving it a coat of paint. One of our good mates, panel beater Mark, starts by getting stuck into a rust hole in the front cross member.
Previous repair. Hey!
The engine cross member has been slightly modified so the 1UZ could be positioned further back in the engine bay. Some reinforcement plates are made up and welded in to retain some strength. With the use of an orbital sander, panel beater Mark sands down the whole engine bay where any paint is going to be applied. The car is then pushed outside and given a bath with a gurney to wash off any dust particles.
Did you get a bit wet then, did you?
I did a little bit, yeah. Hi, Mum.
It's not Windex, it's Prepsol.
The engine bay is dried, then cleaned using some Prepsol before all the bare metal surfaces are covered in primer. Panel beater Mark's been around the last few days, done some rust repairs down the front here and also just near the battery tray where the battery spewed out all some and rusted everything. I've been in there, I've welded the engine mount brackets to the cross member, also just installed some plates to the cross member just to reinforce it where we clearance it a little bit for the sump. Mark's now prepped the engine bay, pretty much ready for paint now. We don't have any special paint booth or anything, so we're going to be painting it here in the doorway of the shed. We've got some of this plastic on, obviously to protect the paint from any overspray. We'll get in there and give it a nice blue colour like the rest of the car. And then from the rails down will end up being black too, so let's jump into it. After colour matching and mixing up some paint, it's time to lay down a few coats.
While Mark's doing the engine bay on the car, we've obviously pulled the engine out so he can do that. So we're going to pull the heads off while we got this opportunity and get them serviced and put the AOP studs and Cometic head gaskets in it. I normally just turbo these and not worry about pulling anything apart. They do handle a lot of power increase. Usually you can get to about 420 or 430 at the wheels and just leave it at that, and they will handle that for a long time. If you get a little bit greedy, the head gaskets just leak and then you start pushing water, and that's what's happened to this one. Rodrigo's got a bit greedy on his, when he put it in his car originally a couple of years ago. He just drove it around pushing water for a year or so. Still made heaps of power. He just kept topping it up all the time. So the damage is already done with this one, so we will pull it apart and just put some studs and gaskets in it and just crank them down, and should be good to go then. So we're just going to pull it apart and get into it. So this is the crank angle sensor tone wheel. So that's how the ECU gets its engine position information. That's not actually a standard one off a 1UZ, old 1UZ, it's a VVTi 1UZ type, so it's 36-2. We've changed it back in the day because you can't buy the 12-tooth ones from Toyota in Australia, so we can get these because the Land Cruisers have them, so we just change it to that if they're missing. Quite often they go missing from people pulling engines apart and losing them. So in this case we can use just that and no cam sensor, because this will provide all the information on engine position that the Elite 550 needs, because it can't do sequential injection, so it doesn't need to know what part of the engine cycle which half it's in. So we can just rely on one sensor for the crank angle information. So these bolts I'm screwing into the cam gear here are to lock up the scissor gear. So you can see there's a split down the middle of the gear there that's actually spring loaded, and the idea behind that is it puts pressure against this other gear and stops them from chattering whilst they're under drive. So to be able to get these cams in and out without wanting to kill yourself, you've got to put a lock in there that locks it in that position. Once you put it all together, you have to take that back out again. So the scissor puts tension against the gear. So I'm pulling these out one by one because they've got to be kept in order, because we're not going to do valve clearancing or anything like that. We're just going to skim the heads to flatten them off to put new head gaskets on. So these shims are matched to the valve and to the camshaft for the clearance. So as long as they stay in order and go back in the same spot, everything's fine. So these heads are what you call ambidextrous, as in both head castings are the same. They can be swapped side to side. They just make different cams for either side. One thing you've got to look out for is that the front of this head is technically the back of the engine. So you have to be aware of that when you're reassembling it.
Everything is coming together nicely. The cylinder heads are refitted, everything is painted, and the engine is back in the car. That's next time on The Skid Factory.